I was like, oh my
Okay,
God.
we're back, we're live. It's, my goodness, Thursday afternoon. It's 12 o'clock. And this is a very important show we're doing. I'm Jay Fidell, and I'm connecting today with my brother Gene Fidell, who is a law professor at Yale Law School, believe it or not. And we have guests who are going to discuss sovereignty. We're calling this show Sovereignty Narratives Coming to a Head here in our Community Matters show. So let me introduce people on this side of the pond, if you will. Okay, Kalamaoka'aina, Niheu, who is a medical doctor practicing in Hawaii and who has been associated with Hawaiian and Hawaiian sovereignty issues for a long time. Many organizations, many experiences, very active, very knowledgeable, a perfect person for this discussion. Welcome to the show, Kalama.
Thank you for having me.
And Michael Lilly, a lawyer, who has also been associated with this for a long time, who has a long history and a long history in Hawaii for 150 years, am I right? And who is actually counsel in the case pending, well, in the Ninth Circuit and in the Supreme Court, as we read yesterday, I think it was, where the injunction issued by Justice Kennedy was made final, yeah?
Yes, by the entire panel of the Supreme Court.
Okay, welcome to the show to you too,
Thank
Michael.
You. Great to be here with you.
So Gene, why don't you talk from your side and tell us who you got and why you think we're here?
Well, I'm speaking to you from Yale Law School. Needless to say, of course, no one here, myself included, is speaking on behalf of Yale Law School or Yale University. This is simply discussion, and the purpose of the federal Indian law class, which is what the seminar is titled, is to explore ideas and issues, see what's going on, see how pieces fit together or don't fit together. Do these gears sort of mesh, or are they entirely separate? We've all done some reading in preparation for this. The classes here say hello. Hello? Okay. You know, we've got, I think, quite a few issues. I've got some questions, and people around the table in the class can also, of course, speak up if you have questions, and that should work terrifically. We're very excited to hear about this. It's really the culmination, because we spent the semester talking about developments in federal Indian law. Today, before we linked up with you, we're talking about developments in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, where you have quite different ways that the law has unfolded in dealing with indigenous groups. This is one of the richest and most challenging areas of the law that I know of. It's for law students, but that's probably unrealistic. But it's a great subject, and the situation that is gripping Hawaii is of tremendous interest to students in this area. So, and we're very grateful to you all and Jay for your effort to bring this all together. Thank you.
Okay, at this point, we're going to make a quick break for connection purposes, and we'll be right back.
Aloha, my name is Justina Spiritu, and I'm the co-host of Hawaii Farmers Series. This is my co-host, Matthew Johnson, and you can catch us every Thursday at 4 p.m. at ThinkTechHawaii.com. What do we talk about, Matt?
So on Hawaii Farmers Series, we're going to be bringing on the farmers and also supporter of farmers, including restaurants, caterers, as well as government supporters and nonprofits, to hear their background stories and understanding our local ag community just a little bit better.
Yeah, essentially there's a lot more that goes into farming and the local food community beyond just producing the food. And we want to feature and get the background story on all these folks and see how we all work together as a community. So join us every Thursday. Aloha.
Aloha, my name is Jim Sean, and I'm host of a show called Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. Each week, live streaming at noon on ThinkTech Hawaii, we interview people who have special insights into education, from early education through K-12 all the way through higher education and beyond. Both public and private are areas we're interested in. We dig deeper. We try to find out what it's really like to be involved in making change, advocating for it, how you reform, what people's philosophies are in reforming it. As I said, we're live streaming every Wednesday at noon on ThinkTech Hawaii. And later on, you can find these interviews on YouTube and on the Hawaii Educational Policy Center website. We hope you join us as many times as possible. Aloha.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Niheu. Niheu.
Yes.
Did I get it right?
Yes, you got it right that time.
Niheu, and Michael Lilly. Just to frame this, we're gonna give each of those guys 5 minutes to sort of roll out the narratives. And the way I want to just suggest what I think the narratives are, but you can correct me in every way. One is we have the move for sovereignty in general. That is, let's roll this back to pre-1893 and take off all the legal events about territorialization and statehood, just take it off, go back. That's one. The other is Act, 195 that was adopted legislature last year, created a Hawaiian roll voting mechanism, and Michael is directly involved in that, having achieved an injunction by the U.S. Supreme Court against the actual counting of the votes, although the voting period has now been extended, and I think voting is still going on. And finally, the Department of the Interior rulemaking recently, where they established a procedure for an Indian tribe characterization of the Hawaiian people. And that is ongoing, and the question is, where does that fit? And I suppose there might be other tracks. There's a lot of people with a lot of different disparate feelings about this in Hawaii. So let's start, and what did I say during the break? Let's get to the bottom of it, okay? Kalama, you're first.
Well, thank you very much for having me here. And on the way over here, I realized I had to really kind of readjust my gears, because when you look at when I'm used to talking about things, usually I don't talk to an audience that considers a treaty that happened 100 years ago as relatively young. Most times we have to tell people, hey, those are applicable today. But those who are involved with Native American rights and law are very familiar with treaties in the past being applicable today. The thing about rolling back the clock, I completely disagree with that. That's not something anybody wants to do. Everybody is interested in moving forward. What we're interested in is looking at what is the history. Just because people look at the history and the basis and the legal framework doesn't mean we're looking at erasure. And so, in particular, putting it within this context. In 1893, there was an overthrow of our kingdom, okay? And back then you had, and this is for our audience in Yale, back then we had a kingdom that was recognized by 19 countries, and we had treaties, including with the United States. When a small group of American businessmen overthrew our queen and imprisoned her, there started a process where the United States slowly incorporated us within the minds and thoughts of Americans as being part of the United States. And there are many people, there's a growing group of people that want to have sovereignty for Hawaiians. Now there's different groups. I'm part of the group that believes that we want to have complete separation from the United States. There's also a large group that are looking for federal recognition as a Native American tribe. So within that context, we have to look at that there's the DOI rulings is just one of the potential options that are available for our country and our people. Now, I don't agree with that option. It's something that as part of Protestant Aupuni, we think is something that is not a good choice for our people. And this is the reason why. By United States law, they did not have a treaty of annexation. We were able through, in 1898, they tried to annex Hawaii. And when they tried to annex Hawaii, our people rose up by the thousands. There was almost 40,000 signatures gathered to protest the annexation of Hawaii. And that's pretty much the vast majority of the citizens of the kingdom at that time, non-Hawaiians included. And at that point, that was part of the process, including a variety of other relatively racist sentiments that made it impossible for a treaty to actually pass. Later on, there was a joint resolution. And that was considered to be what makes our annexation legal, and subsequently the statehood, et cetera. So the challenge that we have currently is that that was an illegal act. We are currently not legally part of the United States, and our kingdom still exists today. And this is really, it's, 20 years ago, this was something that was kind of considered relatively fringe and on the edge. But right now, it's gaining increasing credibility. And I think part of that has to do with demonstrated by just about a few months after one of the leaders of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, which is the equivalent of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, sent a letter off to the Secretary of State saying, we need to look at the legality of Hawaii, of the United States and Hawaii. We need to look at that. And when they sent it out, for the first time after about 15 years of them trying, of the Kaka bill, a whole history of trying to create a federally recognized tribe, the DOI came to Hawaii. And when the DOI came to Hawaii, if you take a look, just go on YouTube, look under DOI hearings Hawaii, the vast majority of people came out opposed to federal recognition, not because we wanted to stay part of the United States, but because we wanted our independent Hawaiian nation recognized. And so I think that within this DOI ruling, and I want to try and bring this out to a larger picture in regards to connecting with the Native American issues, and that is that there is some type of mythos that has been perpetuated that treaties between the United States and brown people are secondary, that they're not respectable, that they do not have the same sort of laws that are applicable with a treaty, say, with Britain or with Russia. Now, I think that with this audience that we're talking to in Yale, I think that there is a recognition that that's absolutely incorrect. It comes from a history of definite racism and looking at challenging the basic fundamental right of the United States to occupy Native American land. So I think that it's pertinent to ally with our brothers and sisters on Turtle Island, understanding that this may set a precedent for recognizing that treaties should be honored. They need to be honored, and we're going to the international community to ask for assistance and allies and recognizing that we have a right to our kingdom and we don't want to be a part of the United States anymore.
Okay, I'm sure that raises questions that will be asked, but not yet. Now we're going to have Michael Lilly for 5 minutes, giving your view, Michael, of the various narratives that are competing here.
Almost all the narratives look to the overthrow of the monarchy as the basis for a sovereign Hawaiian nation, whether it's a tribe or it's an independent nation. When you go back to the monarchy, back in the 1800s, throughout the 1800s, the monarchy was open to all people. They were multi-ethnic, multicultural. My ancestors came from Scotland, and they were citizens. I have my great-great-grandfather's citizenship paper here. He was a citizen, he was a Hawaiian, he was a citizen of Hawaii. Hawaii accepted all races. In fact, there is not in the Hawaiian culture or even in their language a way to describe people on the basis of blood quantum. Even the constitutions under the monarchy said that we were all people of one blood. The whole world, everyone is of one blood. There is no Hawaiian blood, Haole blood, Chinese blood. So it was a multi-ethnic, multicultural place. Now, the doctor's talking about a reestablishing, or what they feel is the monarchy was never really legitimately overthrown, and it still exists today. And that it should have independent status as a nation among nations. To me, that's a much more legitimate, truthful, and honest look at the history of Hawaii than what is happening with Niheu and the injunction that I was able to obtain yesterday from the Supreme Court. Those people, what they want to do is establish a nation of only Hawaiians who have blood quantum from people that are descended from people who were here before the contact with Western civilization in the 18th century. In other words, they want a racially exclusive nation. They also want a tribe. They want something that's recognized by the United States as a tribe. The Hawaiians were never a tribe. They never were established as a tribe. They weren't created as a tribe. They weren't organized as a tribe. They do not fit your traditional notion of a tribe of indigenous people who have maintained their independence and their cohesiveness for many, many, many decades and years. The Hawaiians, as soon as people came here, they intermarried with all races immediately. There was no discrimination on the basis of race. It was the most egalitarian nation probably on the earth in the 1800s. It had full equality for everyone, women, Chinese, Japanese. It did not matter who you were, what your ethnicity was, or what your gender was. They were fully egalitarian, and all people could be Hawaiians here. And I'll just give you this one little side note. They often call the overthrow a bloodless revolution. It was not. The Queen, when the Queen received my great-grandmother in May of that year of the overthrow, she gave her condolences for the death of her husband at the treatment he received at the hands of the revolutionaries. My great-grandfather was killed serving, defending, and being a supporter of Queen Lilly. So when that overthrow happened, it was not an overthrow of just a nation of ethnic Hawaiians. Everyone who was a citizen then lost their monarchy with that overthrow.
Okay, I know you each have comments on what the other was saying, but let's hold them and let's let Yale have a chance, okay? Gene, over to you.
Yeah, well, thanks for those opening comments. There's a million different ways to slice and dice the issues that are raised by the current litigation and also the election itself and the Interior Department rule. So let me start almost at random with a question. In the new entity that you envision, who would be entitled to vote?
Who would be entitled to vote?
Maybe we should switch back and forth and you can go first.
Yeah, why don't you both? Yeah, sure.
We'll alternate answering.
You'd have to have at least one drop of Hawaiian indigenous blood in order to vote.
This is Naupuni.
Yes.
Okay. That's in Act 195.
Yes, you'd have to have at least one drop in your body of Hawaiian pre-contact blood.
Okay, that would be the answer under that narrative.
And
So
so,
this is-
Wait, Kalama has
pre-
something.
pre-
Kalama has
Cook.
something, Gene.
This is pre-Captain Cook.
Right.
Okay, all right.
I've-
And go ahead, please.
I'd like to have a chance to talk about it. Thank you. Basically, it depends on which entity you're looking at. I think that's the question that you're asking. Well, who is allowed to vote during the kingdom? There actually, I would disagree with, it was totally egalitarian. Women were not allowed to vote. That's something that we'll need to address in the current, if we're looking at updating the Constitution to modern times. That's not going to fly. That's definitely not going to fly in modern times. So we're not looking at going backwards, we're looking at going forwards. The second thing is looking at an entity. It depends on which entity you're also looking at today. So you're looking at two different, very different movements in the Hawaiian community. And one of them is looking for federal recognition as a tribe, and another one is looking at nation status. And so increasingly, there is this understanding and clarity and education of what the different ones mean. In regards to, I think what Michael Lilly was referring to, is the one drop blood quantity would be what would be required to vote in the Niheu elections. And that is currently, that's how they designated it. However, on top of that, included on that, we have about 500,000 people. And I understand, compared to a lot of Native American tribes, this is a huge amount of people that could potentially be involved in this process. They only were able to get about, the numbers differ, but some numbers say 9,000, 20,000, some say 40,000, but they're only able to get 40,000 people to legitimately sign up for Kanei Oluwalu, which is the Hawaiian Royal Commission that was created to address the issue of sovereignty for Hawaiians. So since then, there are only about 90,000 people on that list. By no means do they represent the vast majority of Hawaiians. And so what you're looking at is only those people can vote in this election. And so we're not just talking about Hawaiians being, other non-Hawaiians being excluded. We're talking about the 80% of our people being excluded. And if you look at the DOI ruling, in order to qualify as considered to have public support for a federally recognized tribe, they are only looking at about 30,000 of us. So what you're seeing is how the few can hurt the many. And 5% of people, of Hawaiians, can vote to be part of a federally recognized tribe. And this is the problem. This is the problem that we have with that process in the Iopuni. And that is, in 1993, the United States recognized that the overthrow was illegal. They recognized it and apologized for it. And that is a very important thing. You hardly ever see that happening because the legal basis for us as a kingdom, I agree, we're looking at nations. When you're talking about race-based qualifications, you're looking at following the DOI rules. And what we're talking about in the independence community is that we are looking beyond the DOI rules. We're saying we want to be recognized as a nation. And if you look on international standards, no nation can be created that is based upon race alone.
So if Michael,
This is a wonderful show, you know. I'm so happy to be here with you guys. Michael?
I would say I stand to be corrected on how egalitarian the monarchy was, but I think you will find it was among the nations in the 1800s was the most egalitarian.
I agree.
Relatively speaking, yes.
Well beyond what, and in fact, a lot of people didn't want Hawaii annexed to the United States because they had laws that were negative to Asians and Chinese and things like that, whereas we didn't have that in Hawaii. But getting to the Naiopuni, this small number of people that are going to be representing whatever entity they are trying to achieve, everything about it, first of all, it is a state organized, set up, funded election, even though what happened was they set up a private entity, make it look like it was private, so it wasn't a state. But it was all started by a state law, it was funded by a state law, the election roll was created by a state law. So this is a state-run election. But
and you're saying that in order to get around Rice v. Caetano.
Exactly. That's the fiction, and the Supreme Court has never had a problem with slicing and dicing through fictions like this to make something look like it's a private action when in fact it's state action. And unfortunately, it's also, not only is it a false premise, because it wants to look at the monarchy as the overthrow as the basis, yet the monarchy was multi-ethnic and they're racially exclusive. But for the people that are involved, I think the voters, the small number of voters don't realize that there's no oversight. There's no campaign spending laws. There's no kind of way of ensuring that there aren't bribes, there aren't, I mean, I've heard some really horror stories about this voting process where some names are on there several times. They don't,
It sounds
the
like
names are not.
like Chicago.
They're-
That's like Chicago.
Yes, the names are not, their names aren't
you also have
alphabetical.
people like Mr.
So
Roll.
finding a name is very difficult. And then I heard that the top two names, or a couple of the names up at the top, are employees of OHA, which makes it kind of sound suspect. But there's absolutely no way to ensure that this election is done honestly and faithfully and truthfully. it's really a totally phony process that I think nobody should have confidence in the outcome of this election.
So let me ask a question about territory and land, because I've observed a number of panels, and students in the class have also observed a number of panels that are on the internet, and land is a recurring theme. So I want to ask about land, and I want to ask again, well, let me just ask about land and power. If you're talking about effectively secession, because that's what I'm hearing, right? It's a secession, and that's, I don't mean to prejudge the legality of the annexation. I'm just saying, effectively, it's a secession from the Union, right? I'm not taking a position on whether the annexation was valid or not. I'm just saying, Hawaii would no longer be, that we would have 49 states.
Correct.
Right? It would be the entire state that would be a freestanding state of Hawaii.
Or there may be 50 states plus a separate Hawaiian nation.
Located within Hawaii now.
Well, they would own some portion of the lands as a foreign country.
Well, let me, I have to ask you a question, and I'm holding up, the camera can see it. This is the US Constitution, and I'm going to read to you from Article 4, Section 3. Forgive me for acting like a lawyer. It says here, new states may be admitted by the Congress into this union, but no new states shall be formed or erected within the jurisdiction of any other state. So that at least raises the question as to whether, in order to achieve what you're urging, you'd have to amend the U.S. Constitution. Correct?
Well, I guess I'm first next. so if you look at that, there's two totally different nations. Would Spain have to amend their constitution if the United States did something different? Would if Greece would decide to make a decision, would the United States have to amend their constitution? That's assuming that you are two nations that are sharing the same constitution. As regards to the secession, from our perspective legally, because we were saying that we never were are a part of the United States legally, we would say that's not applicable, and the Constitution is being imposed upon our Constitution. But for the vast majority of people, what they'll do is they will look at it as a secession. Vast majority of Americans will look at it as a secession.
I wonder if there are people in Catalonia or the Basque Country or Scotland. Michael, you said that you're people with Scotland. See, the Scots have been troublemakers forever. There are devolution or secession issues all around the world. By the way, as you were chatting, I was thinking, why does this make me think of Crimea?
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. Let's suspend for 1 second, and let me see if there's anyone around the table here at 127 Wall Street.
I think I need to add one thing here, Gene,
okay.
And that is you started out talking about land, and land is very important in Hawaii. Under the monarchy, there were basically crown lands. Then there was the lands held by the royalty, and then everyone else. We had a thing called the Great Mahele in the 1840s that split up the land into fee simple. So I think, the doctor could correct me, but I think what she's talking about is the crown lands, which we call ceded lands, are lands that belong to the monarchy, and those are the lands that if there still is a monarchy, still belong to the monarchy.
Correct. Or to the people of Hawaii, really, because in our culture, the idea is that ali'i were merely stewards of the land, and they didn't own it; they were responsible for it. Yeah.
So that's a portion of Hawaii.
Wait! You've raised an important question. You've raised a very important question. which of the descendants of the Queen would become the monarch? Would it be a monarchy?
It would be a
Don't
monarchy.
answer all at once.
It would be a monarchy.
Okay.
But I don't know who would be the monarch.
So,
My understanding is there are, and this is not a term of denigration, but there are pretenders to the Hawaiian throne. Is that not so?
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
But I don't know how that would be sorted out, but it would be, I think, if what the doctor's saying, it would be a multi-ethnic monarchy, and that would have the ceded lands as its land base, which I don't know what the percentage is, a third of the islands, or?
close enough. Well, I just wanted to address basically there's actually two different questions associated with that. There are different perspectives of what type of nation we'd like to be. And if you look at any nation, they will always be different narratives of where you'd like to go towards. And they always say that the Hawaiians, they always say Native Americans can never get together. They say Hawaiians can't get together. I would say take a look at the parliament one day in Britain, and you'll see those guys fight like cats and dogs. Look at the Republicans and Democrats. We have a variety of intelligent opinions within our nation. And regards to what form it'll take, the last constitution that is being recognized by our community is a constitutional monarchy. We are looking at going through the process of discussing how those changes would be if to bring them up to modern times. Say, for example, internet bullying. Those types of things are not a part of the Constitution. You'd have to update that Constitution. Things like women voting. Those things would have to be addressed. Now, the question of whether or not that would be a monarchy that would be in the current, the updated nation, I think is very much up to debate. In regards to pretenders to the throne, I really wouldn't, at this point, say that they are. I think that really, I think that there's a big question about who the potential inheritor is, number one, and there's a lot of people who have legitimate ties to the throne. But then the second question is, are we going to go directly back to the monarchy? So that's another question. If you argue based upon our nation is still intact, we have a monarchy right now. We don't have the formal government, but like any nation, we have the right to amend the Constitution.
Let's see if anyone around the table here has any questions or comments. Looking around. Do we just keep it rolling? Yeah, go ahead.
Confused about
Speak up, so, yeah.
This is for Dr. Niheu. I'm not entirely understanding your proposal for how Hawaiians should proceed from here. Do you propose that there be an electoral decision to move towards independence, or that some people simply assert through military strength the establishment of the monarchy and claim control over lands? Like, what do you see the process being to move towards actual independence?
There's actually several different routes that people are exploring, and I'm not right now. I'm not going to debate the different legitimacies of each one. They all have concerns associated with them. I'm just going to list what they are. So the first one would be to utilize the concept of indigeneity and look at the United Nations declarations and the rights of indigenous people, and also looking at decolonization protocols within the United Nations. And that would establish a process by which international oversight and third-party observation would be a part of the process of determining what type of government that we'd like to have. Federal recognition would be one, complete independence would be one. There's other options such as compact of free association, and you have the to become really legally, officially incorporated within the United States. We never agreed to do it by referendum or plebiscite. That's what the apology law was about, and so we could do that. I mean, that is a form of self-determination. That is, and so that question of what nation exactly we're going to build is still in question. Now, that's one route. The other route is the deoccupy route. And the deoccupy route argues that since Hawaii is currently having a forceful imposition of one constitution upon another nation's constitution in violation of treaties, they are they're violating international law. And this is really important because, like, you look at places like Catalan seceded and Scotland seceded, and you have, where in the future you're looking at acts of war that are happening throughout the world. Part of the discussion and narrative that people have is, can one country dominate and oppress another? And this is very much what we're looking at, one country dominating another. And so the international community can look at Hawaii as being an occupied nation, and that route goes through, that you can go through the International Criminal Court is one route, and then there's also the International Court of Arbitration, and there's also a few other potential routes as well. So those are two processes.
What would happen to California? California was, I believe, basically seized by a naval captain in about 1847 or so. Sound familiar? It was Hawaii 50 years earlier. I mean, is there a stopping point?
I don't know. It's, these are very penetrating questions, and of course we have a unique experience here that I think is unlike almost anything you see anywhere else, especially in the United States. I don't know the answer to that.
I think that...
let me look around the table. Yeah, Greg, did you want to? Yeah.
Thank you, all three of you, again, for being here. I just wanted to ask, could you speak to the Rice v. Caetano question a little bit more, and in particular address the Interior Department's position that Rice v. Caetano was more concerned about whether the substance of the election is tribally focused rather than or state focused, and rather than whether or not the procedures of the election are managed by the state as opposed to the tribe?
Would you mind, Dean, would you mind rephrasing that a little bit? Because I couldn't really fully hear the question.
Yeah, neither did I.
Maybe your student could get closer to the microphone, Gene?
Yeah.
Or Gene could summarize.
I was just...
Yeah, Gene, why don't you summarize it?
No, I'm going to let the proponent of the question rephrase it himself. Go ahead.
Any objections?
I was just...
Overruled. Go ahead.
I was just hoping you could speak to the Rice v. Caetano question. You had mentioned that this is, in one view, disguised to look like a private election, but really be a state one. And I was just hoping you could address the Department of the Interior's position that the line Rice v. Caetano seems to focus on more is not whether the process of the election is state managed or not, but whether the substantive focus is one of internal tribal management or, state-related affairs.
I don't really see a big difference between what's happening in Niheu and Rice. Rice was essentially, you could not deny the right to vote for a public official on the basis of some race quantum. And that's precisely the issue in the Niheu, what we're dealing with now. The only difference is that it's clear in Rice v. Caetano that the people being elected were public officials. But here they've created a private entity to make it look like it's not a public function. And that's really the only distinction. And we're challenging the Niheu process for the same reason that Rice v. Caetano invalidated the requirement that you could only be of one race in order to vote for an official Aloha.
And regarding that issue, this is, I think, where a majority of the independence movement disagrees with the position of the Grassroots Institute and the blockade that's happening in Niheu. There is, as far as racial characteristics go, that we do want to have an inclusive nation. But international law, there's a basis for recognizing that the wronged party is the ones who make a determination. The reason why, as you can see, there's a huge influx of people that have moved into Hawaii and have benefited tremendously from basically taking our resources and our land away from us. There is a basis for looking at the descendants of the citizens of the nation of the Kingdom of Hawaii as being the people who would make a decision. Now, in regards to the Rice versus Cayetano case, and this is why I'd like to clearly differentiate the majority of the independence movement from what's happening with the Grassroots Institute. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the independence movement is larger, much larger than the Grassroots Institute. And so basically, we believe that part of your ancestry does determine your ability and your, what we say, kuleana, or responsibility towards a place, and decisions that are made in this case. For example, traditionally we looked at, it wasn't race-based, but you had your mo'okuauhau, or your descendants and genealogy related to responsibility to place. And this is where I unite with indigenous peoples throughout the world, is because the vast majority of the history, I believe, comes from people who are rootedness to place, who took care of it and had a responsibility to it. And basically what we're looking at is that is the real dialogue that we'd like to put forward in regards to the question of the votes. In regards to this particular Rice versus Cayetano,
before you go on,
we are.
Hold on 1 second. Before you go on, I just want to. Do you mind if I ask you a question? Would people who are in the native Hawaiian diaspora, in other words, the many tens of thousands who live outside the Hawaiian Islands, have a stake in this, and would they be part of the body politic?
Well, I think that that's something that needs to be fully determined and explored. That's one of the things that's evolving. 20 years ago, there was 40 years ago, we didn't have this common narrative and about really the history of our people, the legality of it, the desire to and the possibility of becoming an independent nation because of this kind of feeling like an overwhelming over dictatorial presence with the United States. That's something that we have evolved as a people, and that's some place that we can have to evolve in the future as a people, because we do need to figure out who will be part of that citizenry. And part of that, if you look at any nation, is who swears allegiance to the king, that nation. That's how you determine citizenship for the United States. That's how you determine citizenship in a federally recognized tribe. You have to recognize and swear allegiance to the rules governing that nation. And so,
in the roll election that's currently in litigation, can non-residents who otherwise qualify vote?
Yes, anybody who's been qualified as a voter is among all the Hawaiians who signed up. Out of 500,000 Hawaiians nationwide, something like 40,000 actually signed up, and then they augmented it with some other lists to get 90.
What about me? I'm not Hawaiian.
You can't vote.
I love the Hawaiian people.
You can't vote.
But, I mean, what about me in general? You have multiple narratives. We're certainly not settled on any one of them, although the paper says that your position in that case is likely to succeed, but who knows, right? And at the end of the day, none of these narratives really give me anything. In fact, they threaten me.
Right.
They threaten me with taking away things that I've been living with here in my 50 years in the islands. And there's a possibility in all of these narratives that I will be left with less than I had before, and I'll be paying more taxes to support these activities than I was paying before. Who is representing me? And what happens to me? And what are my rights as a guy who has relied on the existence of a valid American state for 50 years?
It's a valid point. And, I mean, as a lawyer, I represent Kalamaoka'aina is the lead plaintiff, who's the president of Grassroots, challenging the legitimacy of the Niheu process, which I say is a false premise. It's an illegitimate process. As a person, what the doctor has expressed to me is the most legitimate way of describing Hawaiian nationhood, because it's faithful to history. But the effect of it is, if they're successful, is, you know, I may be a member of that nation, but you are disenfranchised.
I admit it here publicly. I have no quantum, whatever. I have mental quantum.
I don't know, except by the will of that nation, maybe you could become a citizen.
Yeah, you could include me,
and
couldn't you?
that's basically part of the independence narrative, is looking at, once you determine the wrong party, once we decide what type of nation we'd like to be, then from there, like any country, you can have citizens become naturalized. And in regards to...
So I have to file an application?
Like, you know, like your Filipino gardener or your neurosurgeon that comes from Africa, you know, whoever you are that comes from another country, you'd have to apply for citizenship and swear allegiance to that nation, to uphold that nation. In regards to, as far as like a complete dismantling and like ripping away, you know, lands and rights from people that have been here, I think that's really the boogeyman that people are having against the Hawaiian independence.
You remember Perfect Title?
Perfect Title, yes, I remember Perfect Title. And I won't get into all the details around that, but I believe a large proportion of the independence community, we said our people were actually, you know, we were a very egalitarian kingdom. We respected people of all nations. And the people who lived within the kingdom, we treated them very well. They were, other than the small group of American businessmen who overthrew our queen, they were happy here. We like you said, Chinese had more rights. There was less racism. There was less oppression happening to other peoples, and I think that that's our history as a people. And I think that we're going to take away lands from our, you know, our husband's family who has it, or our cousins, or our neighbor across the street. That's a boogeyman, I think, that they use to pit people against the Hawaiian movement.
Okay, Gene, we're running out of time, so I'll leave it to you to try to summarize this and tell us how far we got in our mission to get the bottom of everything.
Oh, I think that it's fair to say we just scratched the surface, and you can see how rich a blend of issues that you'd really have to drill down for a long time. So what I would say is this has been tremendously instructive. And class, will you join me in a round of applause for our panel? It's very generous of you, and above all, I would say my hat's off to you for being participants, you know, active and engaged participants in an important public issue. Getting something on the burner for the people of your part of the world is a tremendous achievement. You obviously are engaged and very articulate spokespersons for your viewpoint. And I think, you know, we certainly will be watching with tremendous interest how the legislation unfolds. And for that matter, you know, if the votes are ever counted, you know, what happens then? I mean, what I would say is, what's that?
They won't. They will not be counted.
Well, you may well be right by a vote of 5-4. We'll see. But I would say Jay and I will keep in touch. And Jay, of course, congratulations to you on your continued service to Hawaii and informing public opinion and bringing shows like this to viewers. I think it's a tremendous achievement on your part. So,
well, thank you. And I feel that you will have another class on this subject. I feel that when you do, we can have Michael and Kalama back, and we can go through this with the next class and have more questions and give you an update on what's been going on. Wouldn't that be great?
That would be terrific. That would be terrific.
Thank you, Gene. Thank you, class. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Kalama. It's been great to have this conversation. Aloha.